Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. So yeah, as Karen said, I'm going to talk about status and how our kind of subconscious pursuit of status can lead to irrationality. So ever since the Greeks, we've been aware that there are kind of two levels of mind. There's the conscious mind and there's the unconscious mind. And so what I'm going to be talking about is kind of what we know about how those two levels of thinking work and interact. So the conscious experience of life is basically a story. So uniquely, the human brain remixes reality and turns it into a narrative, a story in which we're at the center of, and that's most obvious in times of stress and trouble. Like say, if lots of us got caught up in all that train nightmare yesterday, getting out from London. What happens when you're trying to get somewhere, you've got a goal, and then there's an obstacle suddenly in the way of you and your goal. Your kind of consciousness just narrows, and you become kind of James Bond. How am I going to get there? What am I going to do? How am I going to fight the forces of the train companies and get what I want? We switch into kind of story mode. And there are all kinds of things going on in the brain that kind of contribute to this feeling that our conscious life is this heroic story. We have autobiographical memories of the past. We have visions of the future in which we, optimistic visions of the future, things we want to achieve, great goals, great happy endings. We have a special effect which turns the other humans in our life into heroes and villains and allies and teachers, just like the cast of, Star Wars or Harry Potter or a story like that. There's an effect called the spotlight effect, which makes you feel like the spotlight is on you. I've got that at the moment, weirdly. But actually, everybody's sort of quite busy thinking about themselves, not really thinking about you very much at all, which I hope isn't the case in this particular instance. And also, very well known is the kind of the bias which makes us feel a bit more above average than everybody else. The brain is a kind of hero maker and wants us to feel. It's very good at making us feel like the heroes of our own stories. So 74% of drivers consider themselves above average, which is, of course, statistically impossible. 94% of university professors think they're better than average, which is just shows you that intelligence is no inoculation to this kind of stupidity. And when husbands and wives are asked to guess what percentage of housework they do, their totals average 120%. So there you go. So that's the conscious experience of life. It's a story. The brain isn't really interested in truth. It's interested in the story. It understands the world into the form of stories. It understands ourselves and our sense of self in this kind of story form. But in the subconscious, it's very different. So if the conscious experience of life is a story, the subconscious is much more like a game. The brain treats our lives as this game. So Chris Frith, the very well-known British neuroscientist, says, the brain represents the world as a reward space. Our brains discover the valuable things in the world and what actions we need to get them. Everything around me exerts a push or a pull because my brain has learned to attach value to them. So the brain is just looking for rewards and threats to rewards and pushing us towards the rewards and pulling us away from the threats. And what are these rewards? What are these things that humans want? Well, on one level, we want the same thing as every other living thing. We want to survive. So that means we want food, water, shelter. We want to procreate. We want attractive people to spend our lives with and perhaps raise children with. So, that's what's going on a lot of the time in humans. That's our kind of animalistic kind of nature. But humans also want a couple of other really important things and need a couple of other really important things. And those really important things are related to the fact of our evolution as a tribal species. So humans, as you will all be aware, are a species of ape. We're not like an ape, we are an ape. We're one of 5 existing species of great ape. But obviously we're very unlike the other apes. We're not very much like the bonobos and the chimpanzees and the orangutans. We are kind of this weird hybrid of ape and ant. We have uniquely solved the problems of our existence by collecting into these highly collaborative groups. So other great apes live in troops, but they generally go about solving the problems of their existence individually. But we don't. We do it like ants in the form of these kind of superorganisms. So, we collect into these problem-solving groups, and every human in that group knows which part they have to play, and it's the group that solves the problem, not the individual. And that's human life. That's a political party, that's a football team, that's the Humanists, with these highly cooperative groups trying to achieve things in the form of this superorganism. And so in order to get us to behave like that, the human brain has to have these two other things, as well as raw survival, that it compels us to want and need. And the first thing is connection. So all humans universally desire connection. We want to connect with other people and other groups. And if you think about some of your happiest, most precious, valuable moments in your life, they'll be to do with connection, falling in love, making a friend, feeling connected to this group of like-minded people in this room today. These are experiences that we crave and the experiences that we need. And likewise, some of the worst moments in your life will be the opposite of that. Ostracization, social rejection. Universally, we hate that. We hate that stuff. What psychologists call ostracization, psychological death. It's a universal fear. And again, that's because we are these highly social, highly cooperative apes. The brain wants us to have secure connections with other humans because it wants us to cooperate with those people. It wants us to form cooperative relationships, whether it's a dyad to raise a child with, or it's a political party or a football team. It wants us to be a member of a successful cooperative group. So that's the first thing, connection. And the second thing is status. So it's not enough to be securely connected into a cooperative relationship. We have to feel like we are valuable to that relationship. So we've got to pull our weight. Nobody wants to be at the bottom rung of any group. We don't want to be connected but considered useless. We want to be connected but considered useful. So again, just like connection, a lot of our most valuable, precious moments in life have to do with status, moments where we've achieved something, won an award or got a qualification or published a book or whatever it might be. So all humans crave these moments of status. Status often gets a bad rep because in our modern market economy, when we think of status, we think of wealth and fame and all that stuff. But really, status is just the feeling of being valued by other people. That's all it is, feeling of being respected. And again, that's a universal human want. It's a human need. And the opposite of that is humiliation. Humiliation, the sudden withdrawal of our status publicly has been called the nuclear bomb of the emotions. Humiliation is connected to lots of horrendous acts, including, acts of violence. People really hate to have their status taken away. So those are the three main things that humans want: survival, connection, and status. And we've got, parts of the brain that are constantly monitoring our level of connection, constantly monitoring our level of status. When we lack connection and status, we become psychologically unwell, we become anxious, depressed. Ultimately, we become suicidal if we feel unloved and useless, and we feel that we're trapped in our state of being unloved and useless. It's a high risk for killing ourselves. That's how much we need this stuff. But it's also bad for our physical health. It's quite well known now how bad for us isolation is, being lonely, failing in our lifelong quest to secure connection. A survey of nearly 7,000 residents of Alameda County in California found that the people most likely to survive to old age were those with solid face-to-face relationships, and their social relationships or lack of them predicted mortality independently of how wealthy, healthy, or physically fit they were. So, so we need to feel connected, and if we don't feel connected, we get physically ill. And what's less well appreciated is the same is true for status. So one study of more than 60,000 people across 123 countries found that people's well-being, their psychological well-being, consistently depended on the degree to which they felt respected by others. Attainment of status or its loss was the strongest predictor of long-term positive and negative feelings. So that's the psychology side of it. But also the physical health. There was a massive study that looked at health differentials in the British civil service, which is an enormous status game. And they found that for middle-aged people, the people at the bottom of the hierarchy had 4 times risk of early death and mortality than the people at the top of the hierarchy. Again, even when lifestyle and other factors were accounted for. So, and that's been replicated with rhesus monkeys in the lab when they got all these bloody monkeys, and they fed them this horrendous, delicious-sounding diet of Domino's pizza and chocolate. So they got really unhealthy. They got high levels of plaque, and the monkeys at the top of the hierarchy were less likely to fall ill as a result of this bad diet than the monkeys at the bottom of the hierarchy. And importantly, when they conspired to rearrange the hierarchy, the health differentials changed in lockstep. So like connection, status is not a nice to have, it's a need. We have to have it. If we don't have it, we get sick, we get mentally ill. So how does this play out in the real world? This is all very good in the theory. So I'm going to tell you, as the second half of my talk, the story of Marada Dynda, who was a young woman that I interviewed about 5 years ago. So, Marada Dynda was 18 years old, living in rural Pennsylvania, and she was pregnant. And all of her friends were at university, and she wasn't, and she felt very isolated. And she had decided that she wanted a home birth. She'd seen a documentary about home births and thought, that's for me. But it was quite hard to find a midwife that would do home births, so she looked far and wide. She finally found a midwife. And the midwife visited her at home, and she immediately looked up to this woman. She was a high-status individual. She had 8 children of her own. So she was this sort of very experienced mum. And then, and it was just the encounter when she was expecting it to go. Lots of questions about where do you want the home birth and how are we going to do it and how prepared are you for, I don't know how midwife things go, but all those things. and then at the end of the encounter, the midwife said, have you thought about not vaccinating your children? And Miranda went, what? Why would I want to not vaccinate my children? She said, it was like putting petrol in your car. Of course you're going to put petrol in your car. You're going to vaccinate your children. She was like, well, you might want to think about that. She said, after she vaccinated her first child, bam, as soon as the child was vaccinated, the light left his eyes and he became autistic. And did Miranda know that vaccines also gave kids diabetes? And also, vaccines can make your child appear as if they've been beaten up. And then child services come and take your child away. So Miranda was like, oh my God, this sounds horrendous. And so the midwife said, don't worry, no pressure. You just Google it. What you need to do is you need to Google, why not vaccinate? So she Googled, why not vaccinate? And of course, a million reasons came up, why not vaccinate? And one of the first groups that she came across and that she joined was a Facebook group called Great Mothers Questioning Vaccines. And so she joined the group, and she announced herself as vaccine hesitant, which is the phrase they use. And she said immediately she was kind of surrounded by these women, welcoming her into the group. And she, because she got the immediate reward of connection. She felt, accepted by this group and wanted by this group. And she was lonely, and all her friends were at university, and she was like, I found a community here. But then the status stuff came in. She said, this is what she told me, she said, I tend to really respect strong, confident women. I grew up in a family of women, and I thought, wow, look at all these mothers, these experienced women I'm surrounded by. They're so much smarter than me. She said, I don't know what I'm doing, and they all know what they're doing. It was like, imagine you're a little kid who wants to be a firefighter, and you visit a fire station, and you see all these big, strong firefighters, and they're really good at it. You think, I just want to be just like them. I wanted to be a cool, strong mum who takes this knowledge I've suddenly gained and uses it for my benefit, my child's benefit, the world's benefit. So, suddenly she's feeling like, I want to be accepted by these high-status people. I want to feel like one of them. And I've got a mission now. I'm not just this single, when she wasn't a single mum. I'm not just a young mum in rural Pennsylvania on my own. I've got a mission now to help and change the world. She said, I was Charlie Bucket, and I had the golden ticket to keeping my family healthy. It was our job to stand up and inform the world about the dangers of vaccines. So then something interesting happened. So I call this phenomenon active belief, and I write about active belief in my book, The Status Game. So if you think about belief, if you want to have status in any group, it's not enough just to believe that thing. You have to let that belief overwhelm you, fill you up, possess you, almost like a kind of demonic spirit, to take over your identity and act that belief out in the world. So if you're a Christian and you want to feel connected into the Christian family, you've got to believe that Jesus was a real person and that he died and he rose from the dead after 3 days. That's it. If you believe that, you're a Christian. And then, depending on the particular branch of Christianity, you have to believe certain other things. But that's the basic belief. But that's not going to get you status in the Christian world. If you want to be respected as a Christian, you've got to allow that Christianity to take over your behavior, your identity. You've got to live by the 10 Commandments. Like my parents, when I was growing up, we had to have fish on Fridays, these weird rules they have. And so that's active belief. And so that's what happened with Miranda, is that, so she didn't vaccinate her child. She had a big argument with her doctor about it. She would argue with her cousins, argue with her family. And then what she said was that she would have these encounters with other people, and she would come back and she would report on the encounters to Facebook. And the more she did that, the better she felt, and the more status she got in the group, and the higher she rose in the group, and the more intoxicating this new identity she had as an anti-vaxxer became. She said to me, you want to bring it up with people you can argue with because you want to be like, I'm smarter than you. I know more than you do. Look at this thing I know that you don't. The louder you were, the more unmovable you were, the higher you moved up socially. You became someone for other people to try to strive to be like. So I think this is so important in understanding irrationality in human beings. This idea of active belief, it's not enough just to believe some stuff. You have to allow that belief to take you over, like possess you like a demonic spirit. Now, what saved Miranda is an interesting question. So, we all have kind of multiple identities. We belong to multiple groups. And so Miranda just happened to feel that she was kind of a skeptical person, believe it or not, that she was interested in science and data, and that was a big part of her identity. And that kind of saved her, because after a while, she began to notice this kind of phenomenon whereby she was looking up to some of these great mothers questioning vaccines and believing uncritically everything they were telling her about the autism and about the child social services and all the rest of it. But then these same people were saying that the only reason people were gay was because they'd been vaccinated, like homosexuality was a creation of the vaccines. Someone told her that AIDS didn't actually exist, and then someone else said that all the anti-vaxxers were going to be rounded up and herded into FEMA death camps. And so Miranda asked herself, how come I'm believing them uncritically on this, but at the same time they're also saying all this crazy shit. So that was how kind of Miranda kind of pulled out of that group. And then what happened was that she removed herself from the group, and she was interviewed by some blogger about her rejection of the anti-vax beliefs. And when she was interviewed in this very obscure blog, she was basically monstered by the great mothers. They kind of attacked her online as you'd expect. So that's the story. So that's the talk, really. I mean, and I just want to leave you with this sort of, I think, quite important idea that the brain is this storyteller, but what's going on subconsciously is a game. The brain the brain isn't particularly interested in the truth of what's going on. It's interested in the stories, and the brain's constantly asking this question: who do I have to be in this place in order to earn connection and status? And when we join a group that might have irrational beliefs, as long as we feel like we're in a place where we can earn connection and status, we are vulnerable to uncritically accepting those irrational beliefs and allowing them to take us over. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. I'm sure you'll all agree. For those who haven't read the book,
yes.
I wondered if you could say a little bit more about the different types of status before we carry on. And it's worth me saying, of course, the book is available in the bookshop, and he is going to be around after the session for signing. So let's pique their interest.
Yes, all about Miranda in the status game. Yeah, so the humans we're obsessed with status, mostly subconsciously, but we are, and so we all find our way of marking our status in any kind of ways. There's things like age, beauty, but not particularly interesting ones. But there are three main domains in which we compete for status. The first domain is dominance. So for millions of years, since before we were even human, we've been competing for status with dominance. That's the more animalistic way. So chickens will peck at each other until a pecking order is established. And of course, we still do this as humans. And that's not just physical violence, it's also social violence. So, ostracization, cancel culture, these are forms of dominance, like forcing people to attend to you as the high status person. And then there are the two kind of prestige forms of status. So the first one is virtue. So virtuous acts can earn a status, and again, because that's a way of offering value to the group. Back in the tribal days, we could be valuable to the tribe by being courageous, selfless, by knowing the rules, following the rules, enforcing the sacred beliefs. So you can think of people like Greta Thunberg or the Dalai Lama. They're virtue superstars. They're extremely high-status people, but they're not high-status because of their competence. They're high-status because of their perceived virtue. And then the final one is competence. So we also offer value to our group by becoming good at stuff. So successful hunter, honey finder, sorcerer, storyteller. And, same today, of course, the other form of high-status human is the success superstar. So Michael Jordan and Greta Thunberg are obviously both very high-status people, but one's high-status because of their competence, and the other one is high-status because of their virtue. So dominance, virtue, and success are the three main domains in which we compete for status.
And is there any hierarchy in terms of morality with status, would you think?
Well, this is one of the things where my perception really shifted by doing the book, because naturally you'd think, well, if you want to live a good life, a virtuous life, you need to play virtue games. But of course, virtue games can be horrendous. So you know, as I said, it's not just about knowing the rules; it's about enforcing the rules. That's virtuous. So if people try and force people to, you know, when virtue meets dominance, when people try and force people to believe their beliefs, or else, that's when we get some of the most horrific acts of humanity. That's totalitarianism. And so, and actually, how you do good in the world, this is where I've shifted, is really by playing success games. I mean, for me, the person who invented the polio virus has done more good for the world than all the popes put together. So competent success is the way that you do good. If you really want to do good in the world, get good at something.
What a lovely message. Okay, so enough questions from me. I think we have some, yes, we do. We have some Humanistic staff in the audience who can help with some questions. So who has any questions?
What you've described comes across to me as, from my experience of lacking any sort of control over my brain. And so that means I don't have any will about how I'm going to proceed. And my experience tells me that I can change what my brain's suggesting I do at any time. Can you comment on that? What do you think?
I'm not sure I quite understand, sorry.
Your talk to me came across as I have no control over what my brain automatically would suggest in terms of action or whatever. And I believe I do have. Can you comment?
Yeah, of course. Sorry, I understand now. So this goes into the subject of free will, which is, as lots of people will know, extremely complex and way above my pay grade. I've tried to look at science of free will. It's really, really difficult. I think the consensus amongst neuroscientists and psychologists is that some believe we have no free will at all, and it's all an illusion. Most the others who disagree don't agree that we have perfect free will. They have what we call free won't, which is we have the ability to stop ourselves doing things that we don't want to do. So that's I mean, these people know a lot more about free will than I do. But what I will say about connection and status is I don't think you can stop yourself wanting to feel respected or loved by other people. I think these are fundamental parts of our human nature and have been for at least tens of thousands of years, and certainly status for millions of years. We've been competing for status since we were in the trees. So yeah, sure. If you go with the kind of people who accept that there is a form of free will, I would say you're right. You do have some control, but fundamentally, I don't think anybody can stop themselves needing love and respect. That would, and if you don't need those things, I mean, you have a pathology like sociopathy or psychopathy.
Thank you. Got a question here? Yes.
Thank you. So inherent to our nature then is this desire for status, but also you spoke about our fundamental cooperative nature. Is there an inherent tension between this need for cooperation as well as status, or are they actually complementary?
I used to think they were, like in conflict, but I think they're complementary because you've got to, we're playing multiple status games. Every group that we belong to is a different status game. So it's like, and I call it a game because it is a game. So when we're playing Monopoly or football, we're just using that same neural technology. You have to be connected into a team of Monopoly players who agree a set of rules and agree a goal. And so you cooperate in that way. And then once you've agreed your rules of cooperation, you start playing. And so that's true of Monopoly, but it's also true of being an activist or any other kind of form of group living. So I think the connection, the cooperation, is a precondition of playing a status game, because if you don't cooperate at the outset, you're going to be in conflict rather than playing a controlled game for status.
Thank you for your talk. It rang a couple of bells with me. I was impressed a few years ago, and Billy Bragg had this scheme, probably still going, of providing guitars and hopefully some tuition for men in prison.
Cool.
And I'm sure that those with a bit of musical ability actually felt some sense, perhaps, for the first time, of self-respect and behaved themselves better as a result when they came out and didn't go back in again. extending that, would you agree that it's very important in schools to give all children the ability to learn an instrument, write a story from school magazine, act in some drama, paint, etc., that it's really a way of enabling them, when they leave school at some point in their later life, to take it up again?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the most important thing for children is that they've managed to find something that they're quite good at and they enjoy doing, and then focus them in that direction. Like, don't worry about, is it going to make them money in the long term, because we know there's so much evidence that it's not, money doesn't make us happy. As long as you've got enough money to survive, if you're playing a status game, if you're doing something that you feel that you're good at, and you have an experience that people look at you and go, God, that was good. That's amazing. That's a fantastic thing to have, and that's something that you're going to need to have a life of meaning and purpose. So I absolutely agree. That I think childhood should be this kind of hunt for, what am I good at? What am I good at? This kind of relentless search for what am I good at, and then the focus we have on material success, although well intentioned, I think it's less important.
Go ahead.
Are there, or have there been any studies on gender differences with regard to status and so on? Are there any general lessons that could be drawn?
Oh, you're asking difficult questions.
Yeah, good. And then also, what about generational differences? In other words, do differences or opinions about status vary as you get older? So young people have different priorities to older people. Yeah, so the answer is yes, there has been some work that's looked at that stuff. Some work suggests that there are differences in the kinds of status that the genders. Of course, this is all in general. Must be stressed. This is all in general. Not so it's not every woman, not every man. But generally speaking, men tend to pursue competence sort of base status games. Men compare, it's insultingly called dick measuring contests, and people sneer about dick measuring contests, but that's just an insulting way of saying men compete for competence, and actually that's a good thing. That's a really good thing if people are competing to be better at something than somebody else. We can sneer at it, but actually that creates amazing stuff. So there's that, and then there are kind of there's the work that looks at the different domains in which men and women, again, generally speaking, are interested. So the difference in interests are really important. So one of the most well-attested gender differences is that men tend to be more interested in things, and women tend to be more interested in people. So that means that they're going to naturally float to different kinds of status games. So if you were to run a factory that made tractors, don't be surprised when 80% of your staff are men. It's not because you're sexist and you're a misogynist. It's just because and that's why you go to a school, you're going to find a preponderance of female teachers. It's because of the things versus people, the generation, the difference in interest, generally speaking. Now, where it becomes sexist is when you then tell a story where men are better at tractors and women are better at teaching. That's not true. There's one gender isn't better than another gender at anything. It's just you're just going to get more of them, generally speaking. So those are some of the more well-attested gender differences. In terms of age, I tried really hard to find. I had this instinct that the need for status tails off when we get older, and that's why people could have a happy. And I was looking at the data around retirement, but I found it's quite mixed. And then what tends to happen is if people feel forced into retirement, they don't have happy retirements. But if they voluntarily step into retirement, they do. And of course, I think the most interesting stuff about age is about adolescence. So when we hit early adolescence, something in our brain changes. There's a particular part of the brain which gets much bigger, which deals with social judgment. So we become much more interested in status from our peers rather than from our family. So that's when we sort of become an adult. We start playing the games of status games of adult life, and so that's why people kind of flock into kind of like-minded peer groups and start playing status games with people at school rather than in the family home. So those are the kind of age things that are important.
Thank you. So thank you for those questions. Let's keep the questions short and clear. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you very much for your talk. I found it very interesting, and it spoke to some of my own interest in like multiple selves and the performance of multiple selves in different social contexts. But my question is not about that. My question is about, you talked about the use of ostracization as a sort of profound social harm. And I think many of us can understand that and have experienced that kind of thing. And it struck me as unusual on reflection that we don't tend to punish ostracization in social groups. We tend to, like popular people at school or in workplaces tend to be the ostracizers, and they're not necessarily punished for ostracizing. And I just wonder if you might comment on, is there any research on the mechanism there?
Yeah, that's occurred to me as well, especially since I've done this work, when you realize how important our identity is to us. Human beings choose identity over their actual life all the time. Every time someone goes to war, they're saying, I will die in defense of this idea, this set of ideas. That's a status decision. In my generation, we knowingly took up smoking because it makes you like 8% cooler. But knowing we were walking into a habit that was addictive and might kill us, humans are crazy for identity. We need that status. And so then the idea follows that if people attack your identity, it's a serious thing. So my wife was actually getting some heat on social media yesterday. She was being accused of this, that, and the other, in that kind of cancel culture way. And she was obviously very upset about that and panicking a bit about that. And I said to her, this is a form of abuse. It's a form of abuse. But we just don't, as you said, we don't punish it that way. Like, I would rather be punched in the jaw than have some cancel culture mob come after me. Like, I really would. But punch in the jaw would get you a criminal charge. So I agree with you. It's kind of weird, but also I don't think we should have criminal. I believe in freedom of thought, and there's a huge trade-off. We can't start punishing people legally for having beliefs that differ from ours. So it's one of those trade-offs, I think, that we have to endure, unfortunately.
To clarify, I didn't mean legally punish.
Oh, sorry. Socially punish. Yeah. Okay. Good. Right. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think so. But I do feel that I hope that we are kind of exiting the kind of early chaotic phase of social media, and I think there's less of that around these days. Do you think? You don't look skeptical.
Well, okay, right. So I'll leave those comments.
I'm concerned about a society in which we have massive and growing inequality in terms of income and in terms of all sorts of other things. And I just wonder what your thoughts are about the people at the bottom of the heap who have virtually no control over their lives and circumstances in terms of housing, income, a whole range of things. And I can't see what potential there is for status being an important part of the lives of oppressed.
That's an excellent question.
Thank you. Let's get the second question, and then you can try and answer. Thank you.
My question is about the fact that some babies are born filled with glee and confidence and pleased with themselves, and other babies are born rather more, shall I say, introverted and tend towards self-hatred and other things, I suppose, later. Surely this gives one lot head start, which perhaps continues throughout their lives.
Those are two excellent questions. So the first question, yes. So socioeconomic status is a difficult problem. There's a positive thing and a negative thing about that. The positive thing is that we don't play status games with the whole world. So humans are interested in what their peers mostly think about them. So a person at the bottom of the hierarchy isn't competing with Michelle Obama. Like, if we were all competing with Michelle Obama, we'd all be suicidal instantly. So people are mostly concerned with how their wives and friends and colleagues think of them. So that's the good thing. So you don't need to have superstar or even above average income levels of wealth to feel like you have status. And that's kind of obvious if you travel around the world. I mean, it's not the case if you travel around the world. The poorer the country, the more unhappy the people. You know, you meet happy people everywhere. So that's the good thing. The bad thing is, you mentioned the word control. I think that's really important. I think it's essential that people have a feeling of control over their own lives. And I think the word, you know, one of the kind of facts of modern life in Britain which offends me the most is this idea that you have a whole group of people who work 3 jobs, who are working and working and working and working, and still don't have enough money to put a roof over their heads and feed their children. And I think that's offensive, because when you're working and working and working and working, you've deserved that level of respect and self-respect that you should be able to pay for that stuff. And I think, you know, these concepts like working credits, like they're well-intentioned, you know, giving people kind of the assistance to knock them over the poverty line. But what they don't take into account is that the feeling that when people feel like they're being given handouts, it is a kind of removal of their status, and I think that's what's underappreciated. The psychological cost of that system isn't properly appreciated. And as I say, I just don't think it's right that somebody should have to work, who's working so much, shouldn't be given. It's a basic respect thing. Shouldn't be given the financial resources to have a basic life. The other question was about personality and about being born. So yeah, genes are really important, and you know, we're born with these incomplete brains that are set in one particular direction or another, and we might be introvert or extrovert, you know, as we're born, and then we tend to carry on going in the direction as we grow up, depending on our experiences. And you're right. So there are some personalities which are much better disposed to succeed in status games than others. And the 2 ones that are best are extrovert. So extroverts do better in the status games of market economies because we love happy, joyful, exciting personalities. Well, you don't. I can see your face. you don't really like. Okay, so maybe you don't. But yeah. So extroverts do really well, and also low agreeable. So low agreeability is what we used to call a type A personality. So people who are very competitive. So those people also do really well in status games. So that's one of the many unfairnesses there is about this system, is that, you know, everyone talks about privilege these days, but we don't often talk about genetic privilege, but that's a massive one. You know, for people who are born high neuroticism, as I am, you know, we're prone to depression, low self-esteem, we don't do very well in hierarchies, we don't play well with each other, and there's not much we can do about that because it's, you know, it began happening before we were even born. So that, yeah, that's a really excellent question. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, prison is the ultimate deprivation, isn't it?
Yes.
Not only of status, but also of self-worth and connection, and freedom. So is there a sort of way forward for prison reform, given that is so destructive of those essential elements? Yeah,
so actually the status game begins with the story of a prisoner called Ben Gunn. And he was the prisoner who when I interviewed him, he just got out of prison, and he'd served the longest prison sentence. He was Britain's longest lifer. He'd gone to prison as a 14-year-old. He'd literally been sent down in his school uniform. And I think he was in his late 40s when he finally got out of prison. And he ended up having a complete nervous breakdown when he left prison. Like, he completely collapsed because he became a well-known prison lawyer kind of character. So he taught himself that, you know, that all the legalistic rules there are behind running prisons, and he knew more than most prison governors about what you couldn't do to prisoners. So all the prisoners would come to him, and he had this big long beard like a pirate, you know, like so in prison he was this high status guy, and then when he left prison, he was nothing. That's what he felt, and he had a complete psychological collapse. So I think the prison's a really good example where if you feel like you're doing well in the status game, like he didn't, like his story was he didn't want to leave prison. Like he that's why he was in prison for so long. He would deliberately misbehave, so he would stay in prison. So that's the one thing. And I think one of the things that you hear over and over again about prison, they call it a university for criminals. And that's one of the sort of great design errors of prisons is that a lot of criminals, that's their status game. You know, like, I'm an amazing criminal, and then they get to prison with all these other really even more amazing criminals, and then they learn how to be even better criminals, and that's what they want to do. They want to get out. So that's the thing, and I think the way out of that is they need to be much better at offering prisoners other status games to play, you know, not just sort of sitting in a workshop and repetitively making boxes, whatever they're doing, is actually if they could concentrate more on better education, you know, better training, and actually making them feel valued rather than punished, I think you could do a lot more to help them not end up just going back into prison.
Some people want to be king of the world and lots of people don't.
Yes.
Do you talk about this in your book?
Yes. Oh, that was a very concise question. Very good.
Perfect.
Yes. So most people, so like everything, it's a dial. The need for status is high in some, low in others. Taylor Swift, Elon Musk are very high. Most people not so high. So most people don't want to be the top of the status game, because with that comes a lot of attention and stress and hassle. Most people are happy to be, you know, somewhere above average. So that's most people. We need to feel valued, but most of us don't want to be at the top of the games. If we did, there would be a lot more conflict in the world. So it's probably a good thing we're not all competing for that top spot.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all of his questions. And
yeah, thank you very much.
Many thanks again to Will.
No, thank you, Karen. Thank you. Thank you.